So you can tell who produces this program by way of who's doing the poll to kick off the show today. How much Leafs talk should we do? Option A, whole show. Option B, full show. Option C, 100% of the show. And option D, all of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the host of Leafs After Dark. He is a producer of The Sheet. He is Zach Phillips, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we're going to talk plenty about your Toronto Maple Leafs. After the big news yesterday is saying goodbye to Brad Treliving as general manager, etc. And we are going to talk about Gudas and Domi, etc., etc., etc. So don't worry, you will get plenty of that today. But that's not all. We have a lot more coming up on the program as well. So let's get to the Blueprint, which is brought to you and powered by FanDuel. Download the app today and play your game on FanDuel. We are moments away from hearing from Pierre McGuire, a regular here on this program and elsewhere. We'll talk about Brad Treliving fired. Who's next? And maybe most importantly, with the Maple Leaf situation, what type of general manager should this team hire next? We will talk about the Radko Gudas response game. And we should talk about as well John Tortorella's first game behind the bench with the Vegas Golden Knights, and so much to discuss on the Maple Leafs front. And we'll get right to it with Pierre McGuire, who knows a thing or two about a thing or two, specifically around general managers in the NHL. First of all, Pierre, thanks as always for stopping by. Second of all, I guess we're probably in an era now, whether we saw this with Kevin Adams and Jarmo Kekalainen. We saw firing with 8 games to go with the Vegas Golden Knights. Considering how the last couple of years have been around the NHL, I'm kind of thinking we should stop being surprised by stuff. You getting that feeling too? Like, just stop being shocked.
I'm not. I wasn't surprised last night with Brad getting let go. I wasn't surprised by that. I was a little surprised by Bruce, only because Bruce had paid his penance. I think George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon knew exactly what they had in Bruce. George had once hired Bruce in Washington. And fired him. So he knew him really well. And he knew the kind of coach he is and was back at the day. So I was a little more surprised by that. I wasn't surprised by what happened with Toronto last night, especially after Saturday night in St. Louis. Jeff, I'm not even going to pretend. That's about as low as you can go. And that's not a knock on St. Louis at all. Don't take it that way. It's just Toronto didn't show up. And that, if you're a management person, Keith Pelly or ownership, you can't have that.
Well, and here's the thing about that. Like, that is Craig Berube going back to the height of his success, Stanley Cup winner, revered, loved there, a great moment for Craig Berube back in St. Louis, and 13 shots. 13 shots and not a competitive shift in the game. I mean, it really was a tough one. And we'll get to Craig Berube here in a couple of seconds. But let me ask you specifically about Brad Treliving. I've looked at the Maple Leafs historically, and the thing that comes to my mind is they were with a couple of managers. There's always mitigating circumstances. Like I'll paint the picture this way. I've had a couple of people that I've had this conversation with that when John Ferguson was running the Toronto Maple Leafs, Jeff Jackson would have been the assistant general manager. At that time, the Ontario Teachers' Pension ran on the Maple Leafs. And so what John Ferguson would have to do, like every other manager, is submit a budget. The problem was that Ferguson would have to submit 2. One budget accounted for playoff revenue, and the other was reflective of a rebuild. And the one that Ferguson always sort of put forth with his recommendation was the rebuild. But you're the Ontario Teachers' Pension, and all you're concerned about is a return on investment. Which budget do you think gets approved? It's the one that accounts for playoff revenue, which gave Richard Petty cover to say, John submitted the budget and the board approved it. And the failing of us in media, specifically in Toronto, was we never thought to ask, how many budgets did you have to submit? Because it wasn't just one. But so there are mitigating circumstances to a lot of these situations when you're the manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But the way that I've always looked at it here, I'm getting long-winded, is this is a team that has always looked for tactical solutions to strategic problems. And I put it this way. If there's a crime issue, the tactical solution is build more prisons to put all the criminals. But that doesn't address the strategic issue. It is just a tactical solution for the problem. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but I don't know that we've seen a management group in Toronto that can address the specific strategic issues that surround the Toronto Maple Leafs. Because as you well know, it is not a market like any other. Long-winded intro, but do you have a thought on all of that?
Yeah, but no, it's good. It's very appropriate. So I'm going to say this to you based on what I heard you say. Toronto Maple Leafs over the last, let's say, 6 or 7 years have had fundamentally flawed asset management ideology.
They've had
fundamentally flawed.
They've had
asset
that
management.
They've had that coupled with and again, like every team went through COVID and the flat cap, but there are a couple of teams around the league that were really crushed by it, and the Maple Leafs were one because those contracts were never given a chance to age well, whether it was Tavares or Nylander or Marner or Auston Matthews. But yes,
with that asset management problem has been an organizational standards problem. Everybody says it's so hard to play in Toronto. I say, hunk, that's not true. Not buying that at all. Go try to play in Montreal with 2 languages. Go try to play in Vancouver. Go try to play in Boston. Go try to play in New York. Go try to play in Philly. Ask Rick Tocchet what it was like in Philly as a player and as a coach when it's not going well. So there are a lot of markets where it's hard to play. I don't think Toronto is one of the hardest. That being said, their standards have slipped. What you saw Nylander do this year, giving the finger to the TV camera, and what you saw him showing up in the press box after doing that with just a sleeveless T-shirt at an NHL game, unacceptable. Unacceptable. That's part of not having organizational standards. And it doesn't have to be a fashion show, but you have to show some decorum. You do. You're playing for an Original Six team in an amazing market with fans that care and pay so much to go watch you play. But their asset management to go along with their standards, not good enough. The Mitchell Marner return was terrible. They misread the room on Mitchell Marner unbelievably, and they got bullied into it. They misread the room big time. Their pro scouts dropped the ball big time on Brandon Carlo. This is an unmitigated disaster, that trade. Fraser Minton, how you couldn't find a spot for him in your lineup, that's poor asset management, especially when he's playing for you. Paying a first-round pick for Scott Lawton based on what he just did and then getting a third back, that's terrible asset management. Who was responsible for the ideology of bringing in Dakota Joshua? And I want to know who wrote the script in Toronto for we're going to fix the DNA of the team and how they plan to approach it. It's a slick marketing phrase. But what were you going to do to address it? Because none of that stuff ever got addressed. So you talked about media, and I'm with you on that 100%. But I'll tell you from a hockey management perspective, this is a case study in how to devalue assets, not how to create organizational standards, and then not how to implement young players that you've drafted and try to put into your organization. It's a textbook failure. That's what it is.
So the question then becomes here, and we can. I do want to go back to the Carlo deal and the Lawton deal. Like those are two that are going to hang around the neck of Brad Treliving for his tenure in Toronto.
He's got one other one too, where he wasn't in Toronto, the Tkachuk trade.
No, okay.
He's got a couple biggies.
Let me give him a softer landing on that one because Jonathan Huberdeau is coming off a 115-point season as one of the best playmakers. What's that?
Who was his center iceman? Who was his center iceman?
So he didn't always play with Barkov, but you know who the genius on the genius on that line as we redo the Jonathan Huberdeau situation was Anthony Duclair. Because Duclair would do the zone entry because of his speed, push back the blue line, and then all of a sudden, all this ice would open up for Jonathan Huberdeau. And he got to Calgary, and there was no Anthony Duclair, and there was no one making all this ice for him to play on. So it was a completely different situation.
I would see that.
And Tkachuk did a masterful job of positioning, getting himself into a position where he could essentially dictate where he was going. But I digress. There is that one. And trust me, the Calgary Flames don't forget, right? That's why anytime you would hear the Maple Leafs talking to the Calgary Flames, it would always be, okay, but there's a tax on top of this one. Because I don't think that the Calgary Flames ever forgot about what happened there. But the question becomes, and I don't think you can really answer this until you know what is going to happen with Auston Matthews. But what type of general manager do you think the Maple Leafs need here? Because I know, like in the barking chain and the whisper circles, it's been for a couple of months now. If the Leafs make a move on the GM, it's Doug Armstrong. It's Doug Armstrong, Doug Armstrong. You've heard it. Everybody's heard it. Doug Armstrong, Doug Armstrong. What type of GM does this team need?
Somebody that's really organized, somebody that understands professional scouting, somebody that understands amateur scouting, somebody that's not afraid to hire the very best people. They're going to have to do some house cleaning there. That requires some courage as a general manager that's been around the league. It's not easy to do, but there has to be some house cleaning there. They're going to have to reevaluate their development process, especially down in the American Hockey League. They're going to have to evaluate their college scouting and the free agency of college players. They've had a lot of swings, but they've had way more misses because of those swings at the college free agent level. So they got a lot of work to do. And it requires somebody that's really super organized, somebody that's not afraid to push buttons, and somebody that's really clairvoyant when it comes to understanding how the game's being played today. And you got to watch a lot of games to understand that, because every team's different. But I would tell you this right now. They got a lot of work to do. Everybody thinks, oh, yeah, it's Toronto. It's a quick fix. This isn't going to be a quick fix.
No.
This is very painful. And you know what? It breaks my heart. I'm just going to say this quickly. I don't think I respect too many people as much as I respect John Tavares. I'm just telling you right now. Mm-hmm. And I see what he does day in and day out, and I know the way he's carried himself throughout the league. I just did a sit-down interview with Matt Martin, who loves him to death, who can't say enough good things about him. And Matt Martin played and was a bodyguard for Steven Stamkos when they played for the Sarnia Stinging. He thinks the world of Steven, obviously. But when you hear him talk in reverence of John Tavares, it tells you all you need to know. And to see that he gave up a ton of money to stay in Toronto because he cares about the process there, and to see where it's going right now is very sad. I feel terrible for him. I feel really bad for him.
So I don't disagree with any of that. I think that one of the first things, though, because I'm with you, like this is going to be, I still think this is painful. You look at the marketplace, you look at the assets that the Maple Leafs have, or rather don't have. Like the only way you're going to get out of this, like there's no one on free agency that's going to come in and save the day. You're going to have to trade your way out of it, and you don't have any assets to trade, so you can scotch those two ideas. It's not getting better anytime soon. So the question becomes the Auston Matthews question. And that, in a lot of ways, dictates what this franchise is going to be. Like if you're Auston Matthews, and they will have the conversation. Like whoever's running the Toronto Maple Leafs is going to have the conversation with Judd Moldaver, his representation from the team, formerly Wasserman, and it's going to be either we can turn this thing around quickly, or does Auston still want to be with us here as we go through the next 3 seasons, whatever it is, as we try to get this thing going again. But until that conversation is had, how challenging is it to plan out the future? And keeping one thing in mind, again, with the Maple Leafs, nothing is simple. Keeping one thing in mind here, end of the season, Rogers is going to own 100% of MLSE. Rogers just entered another multi-billion-dollar relationship with the NHL, and I'm sure they don't want to see the first 3 to 5 years of that relationship with the cash cow, the Toronto Maple Leafs, in a rebuild. So that complicates things as well, I would imagine, Pierre.
You've imagined correctly. So here's what I'll say to you. You're a multi-sport guy. The Dallas Cowboys turned Herschel Walker into Super Bowl championship Dallas Cowboys. Auston Matthews has to be their Herschel Walker. He has to be. So he has to be. And he's the only asset you have right now that's going to garner major return. Matthew Nyes is not going to bring you that. William Nylander is not going to bring you nearly the return that Auston Matthews will bring you. And so you have to create an auction, obviously with the permission of Auston, if he chooses to want to go. But that's the only way. If you want to do a quicker part of this fix, that's one of the ways you have to do it. And then the other part, this might not sit very well with people in Toronto. You got to sit down with Willie Nylander. If you're keeping him, he got to get read the riot act. This is the way business is done here. And we like all the slick Willie stuff and all this other stuff and Willie style stuff. We get it. You're allowed to have your own persona. but we're gonna create an environment here where it's about you're working, you're gonna work. And right now, I don't think there's that many guys working there.
So, given all of these realities that we just spelled out, I thought it was interesting. Doug Armstrong was on with Andy Strickland yesterday in St. Louis saying that he's going to run the draft for the St. Louis Blues, which I would say complicates a lot of the conversation around, is Doug Armstrong the next general manager to join the Toronto Maple Leafs? Because if he is, there ain't no way he's running the draft for the St. Louis Blues. But the plan right now is for him and Steen to run the draft for the St. Louis Blues. The question then becomes, given all these realities and what this team needs, who are the names? And the way that
players or people that could run the team?
People that can run the team. And I'll frame it this way. You look at whether it's, Zito or Julien Brisebois, like teams get rewarded for having creative management, right? And whether it's something, even just something as simple, everybody looked at, Kucherov and said cap circumvention and, how to look at, Pat Kane and the Chicago Blackhawks and cap, but you're finding creative ways to come up with solutions. You look at Julien Brisebois, who, I'm going to move Mikhail Sergachev and we're bringing in this JJ Mosier guy that nobody really knows about. And you look at that trade now.
We're talking about asset management.
Yeah.
This is the thing.
And you say to yourself, like, okay, there is someone who's thinking differently and understanding the value of players. And let's not forget, too, at the same time, they were looking at Sergachev and Mosier, they're bringing back Ryan McDonough. All at the same time. Like, that's the kind of creativity that gets rewarded. Look at how Bill Zito built the Florida Panthers. That type of creativity, the battery between Bill Zito and Sonny Maeda. Hey, we want to get tougher. We need a tough guy on our fourth line, but he's got to be able to skate. Boom. Who do they go out and find? Jonah Gadjevich.
AJ Greer. Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, it's like, tough guys, but can skate and can do like that kind of thinking, as opposed to just, let's just bring in Dakota Joshua because we need someone tough. And then there you go. That's that taken care of. That doesn't work.
Yeah, so the Nepo stuff doesn't work, okay? And a lot of these hires were Nepo hires, guys that had sense of familiarity with guys in other stops in their career. That's got to stop, number one. Number two, I know people, and I was a coach, and I also worked in scouting, and I also worked in upper management, so I've got all three. I'd be really hesitant to have my head coach tell me which players to bring in and which ones to get rid of. I would just tell you that right now, because coaches are terrible scouts. Coaches scout with too much passion and energy directed towards being negative about people in their own organization. That's just how coaches work. Very seldom will you see coaches scout with positive energy. It's mostly negative energy. So that's why I wouldn't want a coach scouting from me. They usually overrate players they used to have, and they underrate players that they have. That's just how coaches work. It's a bad philosophy to have a head coach or an assistant coach running your scouting department, because some cities they do, and those are the cities where it's stinky, and eventually the coach gets fired.
Can I slightly push on that one with one example, and that is when a coach has, like, I look at Joel Quenneville and Gustav Forsling. Like, that was like, okay, like, this is like, Quenneville knows this player. This is why you get this player with the Florida Panthers.
That's one example, but it does work. Yeah, and that was good. So he couldn't play in Vancouver. He couldn't play in Chicago. He couldn't play in Carolina, but he could play in Florida. Yeah, don't worry. I get it. So all those other coaches are dummies. I know. I get it.
That was Joel saying, like, everybody's missing on this guy. Everybody's missing on this guy.
This is what I'm talking about. There are guys that are positive and there are guys that are negative. So this poor kid got run around and everybody's like, too small, can't defend.
Yeah.
So Joel knew because he had him for reps in practice, and so that matters. But it's a good pushback. I like it. I think it's really good. Are there names out there? Yeah, there are plenty of names. One guy that will never be mentioned is Nicky Bobroff. Nicky Bobroff should be considered to be the general manager of Toronto for what he's done in Montreal. It's crazy, the pilferage that he's put forth in Montreal. I know Marty Lapointe's a chief scout, but Nicky Bobroff's done a lot of that stuff, and he should be mentioned. Another guy is Martin Madden Jr. You want to think outside the box? Martin Madden Jr. You want to get really smart and really creative? What did everybody's comparing this Ken Hughes, Jeff Gordon thing in Montreal and what they're doing? Mm-hmm. One of the smartest hockey guys out there is actually a former scout of the St. Louis Blues and worked for Ronnie Caron and with Peter Stastny. And his name is Matt Cater. He's a brilliant guy. And I can tell you right now, I know he's been interviewed for other general managers' jobs. He's a guy that should be considered. I'm not saying any of those guys should get the job. But if you want to do the interview process properly and you want to find out where the league is heading and where the brain power is, you interview people like that because they're on the boots on the ground workers. They get it, and so I don't know if they'll even do that. I think they're going to go big name hunting. That's just the impression I have. Or if they keep it in-house, they're going to hire Haley Wickenheiser. That's what they're going to do.
Haley or Brandon Pridham?
Or Brandon. With all due, I don't know. I don't know if they would hire Brandon. He's been there for a while. I don't know. As a GM, I think he's a tremendous hockey person, but I don't know if they would do that. But I think Haley would resonate, with what maybe they want to do. I don't know. I really don't know. I've heard the name enough, so I got to think that they've had discussion about it.
Interesting. All right. Anything do you think we're leaving on the table for Brad Treliving here before we move on to a couple of things?
I feel bad in certain ways. He definitely swung for the fence last year. There's no question he did. I really admire that part of it. They miscalculated, I think, on the Fraser Minten part of it. I'm not sure they had to go that deep to get Brandon Carlo. I don't know who else was in the hunt, but I don't think they had to go that deep. And I think if they keep Stolarz healthy in that playoff series, I think they probably beat Florida, but they didn't. So, and it's the way they lost. I mean, the way they lost Game 5 and the way they lost Game 7, that resonated with the fans. I don't know how much people remember that now, but back then they did remember. 5 and 7 were crushing defeats. They weren't just, and they were on home ice and they were savage defeats. They were.
This is always tough too, because there's a whole dynamic of, publicly throwing a player under the bus, airing out laundry. But when it became obvious that Mitch Marner was not going to waive his no trade, whether it was for Vegas for Shea Theodore, whether it was Carolina for Mikko Rantanen, it was real obvious that Martin, but Treliving never went out there and said, look, we're trying to do something here, and this guy won't waive his no trade. And I know managers don't do that, but that is one of the things that's going to hang on Brad Treliving here.
So I got to ask you a question because you're so plugged in. Yeah, you're so plugged into these situations. I'm going to ask you a question. No, you are. You're really good at this. Why was there this unbelievable angst towards Mitchell Marner? Why couldn't they have sorted this out? I mean, I've coached players that have disliked the general manager that we all worked for, or they disliked the ownership group that we might have been involved with, or you know what I mean? But you found a way to make it work, especially if they were an important player. I don't understand how this whole thing got so taken off the track, talking about Marner.
Yeah. It's I had this conversation, almost identical conversation with Adam Oates. And Adam Oates loves Mitch Marner. Loves Mitch Marner. That should come as no surprise from one sublime playmaker to another. And he said, why is it always Mitch has to do things for everybody else? Mitch has got to go fetch the puck for Auston Matthews. Mitch has to go and kill this penalty. Mitch has to go, but no one does anything for Mitch. He said, who's doing anything for Mitch Marner? Marner's being asked to do everything for everybody else. But who's doing something for Mitch Marner? And ever since that conversation, and this is a few years ago, I sort of watched the Maple Leafs in the Marner era thinking, you know what? Oates was onto something. And and you know how well that resonates with players. I'm the guy that's, fetching the puck for Matthews as he's, sniping in 60 plus, almost 70. Where's someone coming to help me out? Where's mine?
You know what is amazing what you just said? So I had this talk with an NHL executive probably 2 weeks ago. They were asking me about Mitchell Marner. And I said, this reminds me of 1991-92. It's actually 1990, 91. Now that I think about it, I got it the year off. I was a year off when Hartford had Ronnie Francis, and he got run out of town on a rail. Go look if you don't believe me. If you're a fan out there and you're reading this or watching this, go Google the storylines from the Hartford Current about Ronnie Francis. He got run out of town on a rail. Can't do this, can't do that. Nobody was doing anything for Ronnie, but they were running him out of town bad. That's what Marner's situation reminded me of, the Ron Francis. And I played a role in that. I was doing all the advanced scouting for Pittsburgh at the time, and Pittsburgh sent me into the old Sheraton Hotel in downtown Hartford, and I could watch. I think there were 3 Hartford games that week, and there were like 3 games in Springfield, which was Hartford's minor league team. We were trying to make a big deal with them. And eventually we did make a big deal with them. We traded John Cullen and the late Zardy Zalapsky for Ronnie Francis, Paul Samuelson, and Grant Jennings. But if you go look at it at the time, that deal was done because Ronnie Francis got run out of town on a rail. And there was no internet then. There was no social media. Yeah. It was the media that crucified him. And it's to what you were saying Adam Oates was telling me about Mitch Marner. Nobody was doing anything for Ronnie. Ronnie had to do everything. Ronnie had to do everything for everybody else.
Yeah. Interesting.
And Ronnie turned out to be a pretty good player, Jeff. He turned out to be a pretty good
just
player.
A little bit. Hall of Fame, yeah. No, it's one of the best centers of his generation. Yeah, no problems there. You mentioned Marner. I do want to get to Vegas here in a second. Your thoughts on John Tortorella. But the other thing from last night, I thought that the one player who came out the best from that Anaheim-Toronto game was Radko Gudas.
So I agree. That takes a lot of moxie and a lot of courage to do what he did. Yep. I don't even know if he was 100%. He knew it was coming, stood up, took it again. I mean, I respect the heck out of him. He took it. And I don't have a problem with what I know a lot of people going after Max today, don't we? I have no problem with that. He was doing probably what he was.
Why go after Max?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm on Max. Max knew and Radko knew. That's fine. I respect Max a ton, but Radko even doing this, he's not a fighter. You know it. I know it. Everybody in the league knows it. It's just not his thing. Can he body check? Yeah. Does he go over the edge? 100% he does. But he took it. He took it.
Here's the
one that's a little crazy. The one that's a little crazy though. If I'm Joe Quenneville, like I'm not liking seeing Leo Carlsson get hurt in that game. I'm not liking seeing Cutter Gauthier get hurt in that game. And I'm not sure that my guy Gudas was 100%. And he took a beating last night.
He's not 100%. And like trying to throw punches against someone like Max Domi who's firing a match while you got the bad ankle isn't a thought that tickles me under the chin if I'm Radko Gudas. But I want to take this sort of one small step further and to play the what if game. And I think in the back of Gudas's mind, he's probably thinking this because he just went in there and like took a couple of punches. Like, okay, I earned it. My bad, awful. I get it. They owe me one. They owe me a shot. I'm going to let them give it to me. No problem. We'll call it even. Because I think even yesterday on the program, my thought was, okay, like Gudas is strong. Like you're right. He's not a fighter. Like he's not Jeffrey Vial. Like he's not in there throwing knuckles all the time. But he's strong, right? But he's strong.
Yeah.
Pierre, what happens if like Max comes in, opens up, and Gudas flash KOs him? Then the whole game is nuts. Because then it's Pizzetta running at him and Carlo running. But the way that Gudas did it, and he protected himself. Like you watch his left shoulder, he eats a few, but he protects himself and slipped on the banana peel at the end and go down. Like, we all know how it goes. You've seen this a million times. But I think that Gudas went in there going like, look, I'm just going to end this now, end all of it, snuff it all out. I'm just going to take a couple of shots because even if I try to beat him and I get in a lucky punch, we've all seen it happen. This thing could just light a blaze. If Gudas catches him, can you imagine for 1 second?
No.
If Max is counting the lights on his back, that game is still going on, Pierre.
No, we would have had to bring in the California State Police. That would have been a whole lot of nasty. It's a great point. I never considered it. That's one of the reasons I love coming on the show. You always find a way to bring something else in, which is very relevant. That's relevant. I mean, but the truth is, Jeff, he knew he had to do it.
Yeah.
talking about Gudas. He knew he had to step in there and do it, and he did it. Like, he's been in the league a long time. He's a good player. I'm not saying he is, because I coached the late Brian Marchment, and I always played him in certain roles.
Yeah.
And Muzz was really good. Like, Brian played the proper way for us most of the time. Sometimes he go over the edge.
Yep.
But I see Gudas and I see Marchment. I do. I see a very similar type player. And I can tell you one thing, Marchment was a really good player for us. He was a really good player in Winnipeg. He was a really good player in Chicago. And there was a young guy that he played with in Calgary named Dion Phaneuf that was really lucky that he broke into the league playing with Brian Marchment. I'll tell you that right now. And so I always got a soft spot in my heart for those guys. I had Ulfie Samuelson too. Same kind of deal. Those guys matter. They matter. They're important. I know the fans can't stand them when they're playing against their star players, but those guys are important players.
Yeah, play hard for sure. I thought that Gudas came out of that just looking great. He took his licks. Great.
Yep.
Said he was going to, owned up to it, and everyone kind of went like, respect for Radko Gudas. Thoughts on Vegas? I was saying yesterday, we gotta like, honestly, like when it comes to Vegas, they don't care how anyone else does business. They will do business as they see fit. They don't care what you think. They don't care what I think. They care what they think, and that's it.
Yeah. I spoke with George McPhee at a big event over in Europe back in late September, early October. Mm-hmm. He was fantastic. And he didn't even try to apologize. He said, look, we create a standard internally. We work for Bill Foley and his family. We want to win. We're all about winning. It's nothing else. And so, Jeff, it's pretty amazing when you think about George, who is one of the toughest guys that played in his era, even though he's not very large. Unbelievable standards. You live and die by the standards they've created. He and Kelly are phenomenal as a partnership. I think about when they had Gerard Gallant, they go to the final the first year, no problem. Then all of a sudden, Gerard's no good. We're bringing in Pete DeBoer. I can tell you, I've spoken to Bill Foley millions of times in Vegas back when I was doing a lot of games there. He's an amazingly intense man, but a very unbelievably intelligent person. It's pathological. He can't stand San Jose. Can't stand San Jose. Vegas hates San Jose. And they hired Pete DeBoer from San Jose to replace Gerard Gallant. Mm-hmm. And you go down the line and Bruce Cassidy. George had fired Bruce Cassidy in Washington, but he thought Bruce gave him the best chance to win. Guess what? They win the cup in 2023. Then Bruce and the players don't get along, and George brings in John Tortorella. And I'm willing to bet money. Part of that is because Torts was coaching in New York when George was the manager in Washington, and Torts' team, more times than not, would beat George's team in Washington, especially in the playoffs. Hello, Derek Stepan, if you remember that Game 7. Yeah. So I'm just telling you, there's things that happen there, but they do them and they think about them. It's just not like, we're going to flip the switch and bring in Torts. There's a lot they thought about before they did that.
So I'm glad you brought up Bill Foley, because I think a lot of it, and if not all of it, starts from the very top, and the expectation and the accountability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My favorite, now I've only spoken to Bill Foley twice. And the one time that I had a chance to interview him, and I love asking owners this question. I know the NHL doesn't like it, but I always ask, if there was no salary cap, how much would you spend on your players? I love asking owners that question so much, because we know the salary cap is there to keep them, to keep them from harming themselves. And he said, without missing a beat, $150 million. I'm sure anyone at the NHL heard that just went like, "Oh, geez, Bill." But that's it. Like, it doesn't matter. Whatever resources you need, you're going to get them, because the expectation here is always Stanley Cup. And that goes all the way down to George and to Kelly.
So just to back your point up, I was at the Pod in Edmonton for 2.5 months when we had the Pod hockey series, Toronto and Edmonton. And eventually we had a final of Dallas and Tampa. And what I remember the most is that's when Robin Lehner was coming into Vegas. And
Chicago.
They made the decision to start Robin Lehner over Marc-Andre Fleury. And that's when Alan Walsh, Marc-Andre's agent, put out the cartoon with this, the et tu Brute, the stabbing in the back. I was with Marc-Andre that night in the lobby of the JW Marriott, which I know you know, in downtown Edmonton, right next to the arena.
Yeah.
And we just sat there and talked for about 20 minutes, just the two of us. Never once was he negative about the team. Never once was he negative about Pete DeBoer. Never once was he negative about Mr. Foley. It was only positives. He goes, I'm part of this. I want to be part of it. I'm going to be a great teammate. There'll be no negativity for me. He was amazing. I'm telling you. And it blew me away. And it told me how much they had convinced him that this was all part of the greater good for the Vegas Golden Knights. Well, it didn't turn out that way.
Yep.
Obviously, Marc-Andre moved around a lot, but Vegas never got back to the Stanley Cup final either. It's just one of those deals. But this is a Bill Foley one for you real quick.
Yeah.
He said, hey, I own all these vineyards all over the world. So I said, oh, that's good. He goes, you've probably heard of my company, the Foley family of wines. I go, not only have I heard of your company, Mr. Foley, I've tried some of your product. It's rather good. He goes, the wines we're making that are the best right now are in New Zealand. I have this property in New Zealand. And I'm going, this is unbelievable. Like, he is so wise. When you spend, as you know, you spend time with him, and you find out how multidimensional he is, it's amazing. And I think, when you got that going on and you're so intense, it goes from business to business to business. He doesn't short sight anything. He's hard on everything, if you know what I mean. His hockey is just one of his businesses.
Speaking of wines, I don't even know if he makes it. Remember Igor Larionov had that there was like Slapshot Shiraz, and it was like,
I think was one of them. Yeah, he still does.
He still does. I always remember that one of my favorite stories was Florida picked up Larionov at deadline, and I think you had a no trade, and in order to waive it, Florida had to, because you always pay for the player to go to the new market, but he had his entire wines. I think he only played like 18 games with the Panthers, but they were on the hook to bring his entire wine cellar to Florida.
Igor's got some successful restaurants in St. Petersburg and in Moscow.
Oh yeah,
he's obviously coaching in St. Petersburg right now. But yeah, he still does it. He's an amazingly intelligent man. He's a guy you should try to get on your show.
I've talked to him before. I would love to. I remember the last.
He's such a good person.
So the last time I talked to Larionov, we ended up talking about. I'm getting off track here. We ended up talking about rink size, and I said, which do you prefer, the international size or the 200 by 85 in the NHL? I'm expecting him to say big ice, the artist needs the biggest canvas, all these types of things, right? He says, no, NHL size. I said, why? He says, I step over the blue line, I'm in a position to score or create a goal, help create a goal. I step over the blue line on the big ice, I still need a GPS to find the net. He goes, I want to step over the blue line and make plays. That's why I like the smaller. I was like,
yeah. He's a brilliant hockey guy. I mean, I've had the privilege of talking to him in a lot of different situations. You know how close the people in Toronto were to having an unbelievable front office? Scotty Bowman was brought in by Richard Petty to interview to take over the entire hockey organization.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I want to say it was in June. It was right after the Stanley Cup was over. And I was driving up north to my home for the summer with my wife and two really young children at the time. And Scotty goes, hey, what do you think of this? Craig Ramsey, Igor, you, me, and Barry Smith. We go to Toronto and we take over the Leafs. So I go, are you serious? He goes, 100% serious. All it took was for Scotty to say yes to Richard Petty. And that's what would have been the front office and the coaches.
So hold on a second. This was the
I'm going to say early
was that the,
2000s.
So was
right
that
after Detroit?
Was that the gig that ended up going to John Ferguson?
Yes.
That was that one. Because I know they had talked to, I think Lanny, they had talked to Neil Smith. They would have talked to as well for that one.
It was a really situation. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. I know Igor, Craig, and I had talked about it. I know Barry and I talked, and we were like, yeah, this would be really cool.
Wow. Why did it fall apart? Do you know?
I don't know, and I never asked. I never did. Scotty obviously moved on from Detroit and eventually went to Chicago with Stan, but he had given up coaching. Last coaching was 2002 when they beat Carolina. It's amazing. Jeff, He watches your show a lot, and I don't know if he's watching today, but he'll eventually watch it later. but he's watching more games. We talked this morning, and he was talking about the Anaheim Toronto thing. It was pretty amazing. It was pretty good. It was good. He's so into it.
Did he like what Gudas did?
He did. He respected Gudas a lot. You know, he thought he was kind of worried the league might have, stepped in a little early, but he really respected.
George was there. Peros was there.
He respected what Gudas did. I asked him about it. I said, didn't you once have a line in Montreal where you started Robinson at center and Rick Chartrand in one wing and Pierre Bouchard on the other?
Oh, wow. That's tough. Whoa.
And he did. It was against Boston in the mid, I want to say like 77, 78, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And he did it. And Larry took the draw.
Oh, he had Larry in the middle? Well, I remember,
Bouchard played left wing and Chartrand played on the right side, and Larry took the draw.
Wow, that's a tough center, tough forward group right there. I remember the Canada Cup '76 watching the DVDs when they came out, and sure enough, there's Larry Robinson at wing. Like, what are you doing, Scott?
I was a kid growing up in Montreal. I didn't know Scotty from a hole in the wall. I used to watch every Canadiens game because that was my team. And I'll remember when they killed penalties. They had the big three. So they'd have Savard, Lapointe, and Robinson. And Savard would take the faceoffs. And Lapointe and Robinson, maybe it was Doug Jarvis, maybe it was Doug Riseborough, maybe it was Jimmy Roberts, the late Jimmy Roberts. But they would play with the big three defensemen killing penalties. It was unbelievable.
Really, eh?
Yeah.
Well, as you well know, and I think back to Alan Stanley, for example, or even like Ray Bourque, defensemen taking draws isn't a foreign concept in hockey. And there are a lot of coaches that believe that it actually lines up better in some ways.
Especially shorthand situations. I would agree with you. We were talking about Ronnie before. I don't want to get too far away where we were talking, but just to tell you the greatness of Ronnie Francis, we would have him. We'd go with 5 forwards on the power play in Pittsburgh. Larry Murphy was the D-man, or when Koff was there, Paul Coffey. But Ronnie would take the draw and then come back and play the point on the power play.
Yeah.
He would. He would take the draws on either side. Mario would be on the half wall. Joey Mullen be on the icing line a lot. Kevin Stevens would be in front. Larry be up high, and Ronnie would be up high. It was
awesome.
Pretty crazy.
Awesome. So, top of the hour, Keith Pelly is going to speak, so we'll find out more about the Brad Treliving situation. What do you, just as a closing question here, what do you expect to hear from Keith Pelly?
I think Keith is really organized, and he's going to talk about why they let Brad go. What he expects.
Why now? Why now as opposed to end of the season?
Why did it happen now? Yeah, why do we do it now? I think it's probably to show people, hey, this isn't something we just did, because Saturday night we let the guy run the trade deadline, but we just didn't like the direction we were going.
Yeah.
And maybe another part of it is they see how competitive the hiring market might be, and they want to get a jump in terms of who the candidates are.
So you just took us somewhere really interesting, because I had that exact same thought when I saw Rich Peverley get the bump up to assistant general manager in Dallas. Now, Dallas today announced a contract extension for Jim Nill. And so Peverley goes up to the assistant general manager position. Whenever Jim Nill decides that it's it for his career, as I'm led to believe, it'll either be Rich Peverley or Scott White that ends up in that position. But part of it too, I had wondered about, and I had people whispered to me there's more to this than just meets the eye. Certainly Peverley has earned that spot, but don't forget, the Nashville Predators are looking to fill their management staff here. And I'm not saying necessarily Rich Peverley for the big chair, but a chair with the Nashville Predators, and this cuts that off right away.
I agree 100%. I've known Rich a long time. He was a really good player at St. Lawrence University. He's a Stanley Cup champion. Had his career cut short because of some heart troubles, but just a fantastic person, great father, awesome husband, great teammate.
Hockey dad.
He was a really, really good player at St. Lawrence University. I can tell you that right now. We've had a lot of good players go through there. He was one of the better ones in his era in particular. And it's translated into his career. I mean, he's a worker bee. He doesn't sit around the house. He works. So I think that's great to see people like that rewarded. I have a lot of respect for that. I really do.
So given that Nashville is looking for a general manager, Toronto is looking for a general manager, do you think that there are other teams out there, further to your point, they're like, hold on a second here. We may have like a preferred candidate, someone we're thinking in the back of. Can you see another team who may want to make a decision with their general manager, kind of say, you know what, we can't get left behind here. The music's going to wind down and we're not going to have a chair.
Yeah, I do. I think you're going to see more of that coming within the next 7 to 10 days. I don't feel really good about saying who they are or where they are, but I do think we're going to see more of that. And one other thing, owners know they got a huge expansion check coming because we're going to have 2 expansion teams, maybe more down the road. And when you have expansion, you lose staff members.
Yep.
And so I think they're going to start to do what you just talked about with Peverly.
Cut people off.
I don't know why. I don't know why we're not talking more about this expansion stuff, but it's coming. And it's one of the things that I'm a little surprised it's not hockey-related revenue. So those checks that go to the owners are pretty substantial.
Well, there was a union that may have asked, and when they were told no, said, okay, what else should we talk about?
Let's go to the Olympics. The Olympics are a non-starter. We've got to go to the Olympics.
I still to this day, and I get it. Like Bettman won the war against Goodnow in 2005. Like they got 2 things: they got the cap, and they got their nemesis out, and they have been on a roll ever since, and it continues now.
I had this amazing conversation with Lou Lamoriello yesterday, not to name drop, but he was on the show.
Yeah.
And he was a big part of the 05 collective bargaining conversation.
Huge, yeah.
He was a massive part of it. And he brought in every different angle, from him being the athletic director of Providence to him being part of the Nets and the Yankees and, the Devils. All these different managerial ideologies that he had witnessed, whether it was being friends with George Steinbrenner or Randy Levine with the New York Yankees. Like, it was crazy what he was bringing into it. And they just outgunned. People call it horsepower. Yeah. The NHL had way more horsepower than the NHLPA. They did. They just had more horsepower, and Lou was a big part of it.
And they knew how to win the public perception. Mm-hmm. You remember the phrase?
That's part of the horsepower.
The PR. You remember the phrase? I still remember treadmill to obscurity. If we don't get a salary cap, this league is headed on a treadmill to obscure. Oh, that resonated. I remember watching this. I was doing a little Leaf Lunch show with Bill Waters, and we were just like, "Wow, that's a Picasso the league just spun there." That was something.
When Commissioner Bettman got hired away from the NBA, they were the first league to really have a cap.
Yep.
He was a big part of the creation of the cap.
Yes, he was.
He was a huge part of it.
And
got enough attention.
And right away, not to relitigate right away, he got talked out of it in '94 by Bob Goodnow, who said, like, come on, you're too smart to have a cap. You don't need a cap. Like, it really was a brilliant play by Bob Goodnow at that point. Yeah. Now, I think a lot of that had to do with, there are a lot of owners that didn't own their buildings, and there was pressure on because of the dates. And I think after that, Bettman said, like, look, if we're going to have any leverage in negotiations, we all have to own our buildings. That's the way it's got to happen, and that ended up happening, and the rest is history. But how Goodnow was able to talk Bettman out of the salary cap in '94, corrected in 2004, 2005. But that one was an interesting one. Pierre, always good for the now and the then and the future as well with expansion. Always good to catch up and go over hockey notes with you, my friend. You be well.
Thanks for making this so much fun, Jeff. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of the season. I'll talk to you before the playoffs.
Yes, sir, we will indeed. The great Pierre McGuire, who stops by here on a regular basis. Thanks to Pierre. And just so we're sort of like the team that I was wondering about when I talk about other teams that may look to do something with their manager, it's always an uncomfortable situation, but I think a lot of people are wondering about the New Jersey Devils. And now that there are 2 teams out there that are looking for a new general manager, there are other teams out there, as Pierre and I just talked about, who are looking at their own team and saying, if we're thinking about doing it, we might want to get a jump on it here too, because Nashville is into their process and Toronto is going to start going into their process as well. And again, Keith Pelly, President MLC, will be speaking here in 8 minutes' time, at the top of the hour. So, want to remind you of a couple of things. This segment, a presentation of the Ninja Crispy Pro Countertop Glass Air Fryer. Shark Ninja is elevating the air fryer experience. The Ninja Crispy Pro is a family-sized cooking system that comes with a 6-quart, 2.5-quart glassware, storage lids, crisper plates, and a modular base for any occasion. The clean, crisp glassware is designed for non-toxic cooking and storing. Go from frozen to crispy with the thermal shock-resistant, clean, crisp glassware. The Ninja Crispy Pro is powerful. 1,800 watt, there we go, 1,800 watt air fryer that can cook 7.5 pounds of chicken, feeding up to 10 people. Or 3 hockey players. It's customizable with 6-in-1 functions: max crisp, air fry, bake, roast, re-crisp, and dehydrate. For more information on the Ninja Crispy Pro, visit the link in our description or go to sharkninja.ca. Zach, anything from our conversation about your favorite team that you would like to point out or draw specific attention to?
I just don't understand the timing of it, really. Just operating off the trade deadline and now doing it, not necessarily even before the season ends, but 8:45 on a Monday night. We always joke about the 5 p.m. news dump on the Friday. Get it out there. Yeah. Everyone's finished all the news programming.
4:59.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This was kind of like all eyes in the world are on us here. The Radko Gudas game is an hour and 15 minutes away, and we fire our GM. And I'm like, okay, that's the thing It just felt weird, feels a little bit messy. I feel like all the way through, it just doesn't feel like a very well coordinated plan of attack that took place here, Jeff. I could be completely wrong, but that's my personal feel on it as we saw that news last night.
There has been pushback on the idea that Brad Treliving sort of knew that Keith Pelly was out there in market talking to other people and said, like, look, if we're not going to be doing this long term and you're looking to fill the position, like, just do it now. Just do it now. Now, there has been some pushback on that. I still do wonder if, considering Nashville is in their process and maybe there are other teams that could be in their process soon as well, that they want to get more of a head start on the market, considering we may be going through like an era where there's more than just 2 new general managers in the NHL. That's what I do wonder about.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair, and I think that that's probably fair if the team that you just alluded to, like New Jersey, comes out and does that because they recognize what happens and they want to move off of Fitzgerald and find somebody else. Because the pattern here for New
by the way,
Jersey
I'm not saying that that's happening. I mean, in the whisper circles,
no, I know.
That's the one we're all wondering about.
No, I know. Sorry, I should have clarified. I'm just saying but based off the example that you're using there, more so what I'm getting at is they've not put together a pattern here of sporadicness this season. And what we've seen from the Maple Leafs has felt like a lot of flying by the seat of their pants. All you have to do is look back to what their plan, air quotes, was going into the Olympic break. Are they going to be sellers at the deadline? Are they going to be buyers at the deadline? Will they stand pat? Well, the next 5 games will tell us. Why? Why will the next 5 games tell us? And then they won 3 of those, and it was like, well, they might not sell as much. They might not sell the guys you think they're going to sell. And then they came back, and then they kind of crapped themselves effectively. And it was like, okay, now we have to sell. Each time some of these occurrences have come up, it's been like, well, we'll figure it out as we go. Even the Mark Savard firing, an assistant coach, the assistant coach was the guy who had to go at that point in time, right? It just feels like the organization as a whole right now is not operating, A, on the same page, or B, with a clear plan in mind. Because I can take what you're saying about getting ahead of the curve and completely understand that and get on board with it when I'm looking at organizations that have seemed to be following some type of schedule or path. I don't feel that way about the Maple Leafs and the way they're being run right now. I don't.
It's going to be fascinating to hear what Keith Pelly says here coming up in a couple of moments. And so we let everybody get there on time. Let's put the spotlight on Zach. By the way, how was Mike in Buffalo last night on the program? Was Mike spitting fire or was he feeling good? How was he? John Tavares, Max Domi fan club. How was Mikey?
He was fired up. It was a good one. I started the show at 1 a.m. We went for 2
I know.
hours last night on the post game.
He texted me. He's like, I'm going out with Zach
pretty
tonight. I'm like,
fired up.
holy jeez, you're up late, bud. Nighty night.
Yeah. It's just the whole combination of everything that led into the game to what happened in the game led for a pretty good show and
awesome.
pretty fun time with Mike. He stayed on with me for an hour, so I had a blast.
I got all day for that guy. I love him. The sheet is powered by FanDuel. Play your game with FanDuel. It's the NHL season, and FanDuel is your home for all the action on the ice. From Blue Line to Bet Slip, we've got you covered all season with unique promos, live offerings, and more features to let you play your game. Missed puck drop? No sweat with the live same-game parlay. You can build your bets up until the final buzzer. Download FanDuel Sportsbook today and play your game. Please play responsibly, 18 plus, and physically located in Ontario. If you have questions or concerns about your gambling or the gambling of someone close to you, please contact Connects Ontario at 1-866-531-2600 to speak to an advisor free of charge. By the way, you know who I think should be the next GM of the Maple Leafs?
Who?
Mike Gillis. Ask me about that after. But go!
You don't throw that grenade. Come on.
Go!
Oh, man. Okay, well, today's parlay will be in theme with this. There's a lot of talk about who should be the next GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Jeff. And I see online and I'm listening to different people talk about it, and there's people who seem to believe that the next GM or president or whoever runs the operation here in Toronto, they should be someone with bark. There's a lot of other people who seem to believe that it should be someone analytically driven, maybe someone a little bit geeky. You know what? At the end of the day, I don't care, because from what we've just seen over the last 3 years with Treliving, it needs to be somebody who can, at minimum, haggle. I think you know the three. Before I put it on screen.
Wow. So Denver Barkey is the obvious one for the Philadelphia Flyers. Little nod to the London Knights there. Morgan Geeky and Brandon Hagel. $5 wins you $264.50. Should it be someone with bark or someone geeky? I don't care as long as they can haggle. Have any of these hit? They're wildly entertaining. I love them.
No. Last night we were close though. We missed on one leg. What was it? Snuggerud didn't score. That was the only one that didn't get it.
Nah, he's been great too on that first line with the St. Louis.
Barzal scored. Nye scored. Snuggerud did not. Close.
Alas. That was a fun one. I think Mike Gillis, because I think there needs to be, like, if you're not going to have an official, president of hockey operations, you need someone there who's done that role and someone in a presidential capacity. And also you need like a forward thinker and a planner. Like, I was on with DFO Live, and I was like talking to Hudson Tyler, and it's like, you need to have someone that can plan and not just plug holes. Right? Like, there needs to be like a plan other than, well, we need this fourth line right winger and he's available. He's a fourth line right winger, so we're going to get that player. There needs to be something a lot deeper than that. And I think you need to have someone that is really creative. And, one of the things that I think a lot of people point out with Mike, where he was really ahead of the curve, is in sleep. Remember when Mike Gillis kind of redid like sleep schedules for the Vancouver Canucks? You probably don't remember this. Maybe you don't remember this. So Mike Gillis, and now, by the way, everybody does this. But this is back in like 2009, 2010. And what Mike did is he hired people to do sleep studies for his team based on travel and how they could maximize their, recuperation and rest through more effective sleeping and napping. And I honestly, Zach, at the NHL, everybody laughed. I can tell you honestly, and Mike knows this, everybody laughed at him. Like, this is the most important thing to the Vancouver Canucks. Like, what is Gillis doing? This is ridiculous. Oh, he's going to get like softer pillows for the Sedins. Okay, well, that's going to make them win more games. Now, how much every team when you talk to, every team that you talk to there's always a conversation about rest and recuperation and sleep and how their athletes sleep and recover. Mike was the first. And that's always been how Mike Gillis thinks. Plus, he is kind of like the godfather when it comes to agents around the NHL. Like, a lot of agents still call him for advice. Plus, he's worked management for a number of years. He was the finalist, a finalist, because it was him and Marty at the end, for the executive director job at the National Hockey League Players Association. And he's someone that takes long view, and he's not someone that gets pushed or bullied into decisions. If I'm the Maple Leafs, Mike Gillis, and I think of the staff, like progressive, forward-thinking people that he could bring aboard, that is, if I'm a Maple Leafs fan, that's catnip, man. That's catnip. That's like a new vision forward.
Okay, you've sold me. I'm in. By the way,
just be Doug Armstrong.
Sleeping. Sleeping.
Yeah.
I can understand if he was like pitching that you have to go to sleep with like a green gel on your body and red lights in the room to get something out of you that like is buried deep within. Sleeping. Guys, like, come on. Sleeping, we all should have been able to predict that sleeping better would have helped you rest and recover.
But nobody did.
Come on.
Nobody did.
I believe
I
you,
know.
but it's just,
Nobody did.
Is...
It was like, what is Mike wasting his time for? Yeah. Have a couple of beers at the hotel bar, go to sleep. Wake up and go skate. Whoop-de-doo. That's what you do on the road. Like, no, man. Like, Mike had it all mapped out. Smart guy. Smart dude. Anyway, that's again. If I'm Keith Pelly, that's where I'm going with my next hire here. But we shall see, and we'll see in moments as Keith Pelly starts talking here and explains what happened with Brad Treliving. And to Zach's point, why last night before Gudas took his medicine? Why? I said why enough here? All right. Enjoy the hockey tonight. We're back tomorrow. Tomorrow is, of course, Wednesday, and we don't have Brian because Brian's in Australia. Wish is is he at Disneyland or Disney World? He's at one of the two. Brian's in Australia.
World.
Oh, Disney World. So he's in Florida. Okay, so he's Disney World. Brian Burke is in Australia. So we'll have something for you tomorrow. Don't worry, we'll have a flavor puck or two for you here on the program. So join us tomorrow right here, whether you are watching on YouTube. If you've already subscribed, we thank you. If you haven't already, please consider doing so, or you're listening on your favorite podcast platform. We thank you for giving us your attention today. Back tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern, right here for The Sheet. Jeff Marek along with you. Hope you enjoyed the program today. If you did, or maybe even if you didn't, they can't all be gems, folks. Please hit the subscribe button. Also a reminder, every morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, Johnny Lazarus, Colby Cohen, I call them the Impact Players. You might know them as a tandem that makes up the Morning Cup of Hockey. Also DFO Live at noon Eastern. This year, your host Tyler Yaremchuk alongside Carter Hutton. Full day's worth of programming right here on Daily Faceoff, your favorite YouTube hockey channel. And as a reminder as well, Zach Phillips, our producer here for The Sheet, said if you subscribe, he'll buy you a puppy. It's true.